Hi friends, I'm Scott Giles and welcome to Power Talk, my podcast here on Facebook Live and YouTube. I cover topics related to hypnotic coaching, the hypnotic arts and sciences generally, and spirituality. If you'd like to know more about my professional work, check out my website, which I'll tag at the end of this video. Today I want to talk about what I and others call upward failure, a term created to explain how people who keep screwing up still somehow keep getting promoted and getting ahead. I've seen this, you've seen it, I'm sure, and I think a lot of us just sort of wonder, I work so hard, how come these other people who just don't really have it seem to get ahead? Now, there's a thing called the Peter Principle, named after the 1969 book of the same title by Lawrence J. Peter. And the Peter Principle is that in business situations, people tend to rise to the level of their incompetence. That is, they get a job, they do well, they get promoted, they do that well, they get promoted, they do that well, they get promoted, and finally they get to a point where they really don't have the skill set to deal with that level of work. But the company doesn't want to fire them because they have been good up to now, so they tend to stay in the position that they're not really doing well in. So they rise to their level of incompetence and then stall at that level of incompetence. They don't get promoted and they don't tend to get fired. They just stay there doing a kind of half-assed job. Now, this is probably not quite as true as it was during the 1960s because companies, at least in my experience of them, seem to have become much more aggressive about culling non-performing or low-performing members of the team regardless of past experience. But I still think there's something to this, that people tend to rise to their level of incompetence and then sort of stay there. When I was in culinary work, I saw this a lot. We have someone who was a great line cook, but then they get promoted to sous chef. Or someone who's a great sous chef, this is second in command of a kitchen, but then gets promoted to executive chef, where they're primarily doing menu planning and negotiations and public marketing, and they're not good at that. I've seen it in parish ministry too. So people who are in this trap, and it's a trap because no one wants to do a bad job, they often don't realize what's happened to them. They've risen well, and now they're in a place where they're not happy with their own performance, but they don't realize what's happened. And the danger is they will begin to empower other people who think like they do and who also can't get the job done. As a religious professional, I look at a variety of denominations that are struggling right now, and I see exactly that. People who were, on the whole, good community or parish ministers go into denominational administrations where they're not good administrators. They don't have good human resource skills. They may have been just fine managing a congregation and preaching sermons, but when they have to deal with difficult negotiations regarding conflict, they're out of their depth. They've risen to their level of incompetence, and as a result, they do bad work. Now, there's an old saying that those who can do, do. Those who can't do, teach. Now, this is not fair to teachers. There are many teachers who are highly competent, who love teaching and do a great job. And not all denominational leaders are dim bulbs. But there is still something to this. And you see this when you see individuals in a company system who are clearly screwing up, but yet invisible hands keep lifting them out of trouble. So I asked myself, what is fueling this? The Peter Principle makes perfect sense. People rise to their level of incompetence and then stay there. This even can be institutionalized in Japanese corporations called Zabatsu. They have a thing called being promoted to a window, which is when management realizes that this former rising star isn't doing a good job anymore. They get promoted to a nice office with a window, but they have no responsibilities. And they can look out the window and wonder where their career went. Uh, my late first wife worked for a major New York corporation, and they had a thing called getting promoted to the 13th floor. Executives would find themselves promoted to an office on the 13th floor of the company building. And when they were asked, well, what are my duties? They were said, oh, whatever you want. And this was actually the company's way of saying, start looking for another job. So sometimes upward failure is completely explained by the Peter Principle. But there's also a thing I call organizational inertia. And organizational inertia goes along with the Peter Principle. Someone does a job well, gets promoted to a position where they're not doing well, but no one wants the hassle of fixing that. So they just start to work around the dysfunctional person. This can often get started when an individual is actually cheating initially. They're claiming credit for work that isn't theirs or so on, but they get away with it. And the supervisors and upper management don't realize that this person is getting ahead inappropriately, and instead they tag that person as a rising star in the company. And because that person is a rising star, opportunities are given to that person that are denied to other persons. And so they keep moving up despite the fact that there are others who have never cheated who could really do the job better. I've heard lots of stories of this from my clients who are executives. The smart ones figure it out and view the rapidly rising stars in their company with a little bit of suspicion. They take them positively, but they double check the footnotes. They be sure who was actually on the team, and they don't necessarily provide the rising stars with a big leg up. Now, everyone screws up sometimes. Certainly in my life and career, I have made mistakes. There's an old Chinese saying that a young doctor makes a lumpy graveyard, meaning while you're learning what to do and not do, you end up killing some of your patients. And well, I've never done that, but one of the ways one acquires wisdom is by making mistakes and discovering what happens next. The ability to learn from a mistake, to make a graceful recovery from having made a mistake, what I sometimes call knowing how to make a soft landing. That, in my mind, is what distinguishes the people who really have the human skills to excel from those who don't, who are rising to their level of incompetence or merely staying in place due to organizational inertia. The people who can make mistakes, learn from them, gracefully make a soft landing and continue, these are the people to notice and to learn from. The wise learn from their mistakes and do not make them again. The wise understand what they're good at and keep doing it. People who make mistakes but still manage to land on their feet are worthy of study. Finally, as I close with this podcast, I'd like to pass on something from my own life, which is one of the things you can do to avoid failing upward is to know when to say no, to know when to turn down an opportunity because it's not a good match for who you are and would lead to your rising to the level of incompetence, either to be later eliminated or to stay in place through organizational inertia. Uh, I love to cook. I am a serious foodie. Once upon a time, I was in fact a culinary worker, and I worked through the stations, utility, garde manger, line cook, and so on. I would go to be a Zeus chef, second in command of a kitchen. And what I discovered is I didn't like being a Zeus chef. The money was better, I like that, but I wasn't cooking anymore. I was supervising people who were cooking. I don't like supervising people who are cooking. I like cooking. I wasn't doing what I enjoyed. I felt my call to ministry. I retrained. I became a parish minister, serving a small church for 3 years and a larger one for 10. As minister of that larger church, I wasn't doing ministry anymore. I was supervising people who were doing the ministry. I didn't like supervising people who were doing ministry. I liked doing it. And so when I made my jump from parish into community ministry, which is what my hypnotic work is considered by my denomination, I promised myself I would not do it again. I would not let my practice grow out of my control. I want to do the work I enjoy. And so I do a little bit of teaching and I do a little bit of supervision, but primarily I work with my clients. That's what I enjoy. And I have 5 times structurally made decisions to keep the practice limited so that I do the work I like doing instead of letting someone else have all the fun. I've become well known as a hypnotist, and I could easily operate a group practice where I could lease office space or employ colleagues. Don't want to do that. Don't want to make that mistake again. You want to rise in whatever activity you do, but you don't want to do that by failing upward and ending up in a position where you're not doing the work you enjoy. Hey, thank you for your time and attention today. I'll be back next week with another talk on a different subject, and I'd like to invite you to join me. It does help me if you let others know about my work and my videos, so please share, like, and subscribe. And of course, if I can be of help to you personally, feel free to reach out through email, my Patreon channel, or my website. Stay well and stay safe.